Hey guys, it's Kevin DeSilva here with the Living in Los Angeles channel, and today we're going to talk about selling your home in a divorce. And this video isn't theoretical. This is a real life situation that played out that I'm going to share with you today that highlights my 3-point checklist to help you get through the divorce. With a client that I met door knocking, where they were ready to hire another agent. They ended up moving on from that agent and hiring me. Not only did I sell that home for hundreds of thousands of dollars more, but both parties were very happy that I was a part of the negotiation and the marketing of the home. And that home held a record for 3 years for the highest sale of a 3-bedroom house in the West Los Angeles area of Mar Vista. Now, the first point on the checklist is pricing. There are a lot of things going on here. First of all, you probably tried buying your spouse out. And in that situation, you were anchoring to a lower price because, well, you didn't want to have to pay a higher half. And in that same negotiation, your spouse might have been anchoring to a higher price because, well, they wanted a bigger half. So once you've had this unsuccessful negotiation to buy out your spouse, what do you do when you're at arguably 2 different values? So the reality is, once you're done with this unsuccessful negotiation of trying to buy out your spouse and you determine that you're going to sell it, how do you reconcile these 2 wildly different values? Well, that's where you need to look at the data. And not ideal to actually involve your real estate agent or their real estate agent who helped you spin those values because you've already breached trust. And for both of you to want to move forward together at a value that will get you the most money in your pocket, it is best to have a lack of bias or no bias going into the new value. You also want to take a look at what things can you do to the home, what improvements, what upgrades you make that will get you both more money. And the good news is neither of you end up having to invest in it. There are options that you can bring to the table to help you improve your house without having to dip into your savings account. Because let's be real, when you're paying legal fees already, that's the last thing you want to do. Now, I connected with this particular seller who lived on Armacost. I was walking up the street and he was putting out his trash, and I happened to talk to him, and he said he was going through a divorce. He mentioned that they were going to be selling, and he wanted to get an opinion of the value of the home. Without having any allegiance to anybody, I walked through the home, I put together a report, and I came back the next day. And when I came back, I told him, your home was worth around $1.8 million. But what's funky about it is it's a 3-bedroom house. It's just a really nice, big 3-bedroom house. The other homes that were selling at or above $1.8 million at that time in 2018 were all 4-bedroom homes. Now, he had told me that he was already at length in conversation with the local expert, and that person was saying it was only worth about $1.6 million. That's where he wanted to list it. Now, I shared some insight. See, I have a background in construction. I have a background in economics and finance, as I have been a financial advisor. I went to UC San Diego and studied economics, and I've run a painting business, worked on underground utilities, you name it, I've done it. Now, one aspect that worked to my advantage was I was very active in the market. And aside from this particular real estate agent, I was the 2nd or 3rd best agent in the neighborhood. And clearly, on price, I was going higher because I saw the vision for the home. And unlike other agents out there, I don't just look to underprice a home, because sometimes overpricing a home can be the better bet. Let me give you an example in this situation. The other agent wanted to go $1.6 million because they wanted a quick sale, whereas I was suggesting going $1.85 million. This was not to buy the listing. In fact, I was very clear that I thought the home would sell between $1.75 million and $1.8 million. But sometimes starting where you want to be, knowing that there's a smaller buyer pool, is going to hurt you. In fact, I mentioned, hey, this is the top end of the market. At that time in 2018, 1.8 was a lot of money. So it was the top end of the market. If you price it at 1.6, your offers might not even go over 1.7. Now, after some misgivings, the wife came on board because she had known that other agent for a very long time. But it's hard to walk away from a game plan that can net you over $100,000 more money in your pocket. So pricing your home objectively, not subjectively, is the first point on the checklist. Because the reality is, if you're going to get the highest price for your home in this divorce situation, your agent should be neutral because they really are working for both of you. But before you were a married couple, now you're warring parties. And so there are special criteria that go into this. So the criteria that you need to really look at when you're selecting a neutral agent is, what are they going to do to communicate with you guys? Do you want to be on separate group threads but just getting the same message? And I know this is twice the work for the real estate agent, and it's part of the reason why real estate agents sometimes steer away from divorces. They don't want to burn a friendship or future relationship. like a lot of times will go on to buy another home. They want to be the agent for that. They don't want to potentially lose the sale by having a huge conflict and getting fired and then not getting purchase out of it. Because the reality is, in real estate, we get paid when the job is done. Now that brings us to our second point on the checklist, and that is the neutrality test. Now this one is key because the reality is you don't like each other right now and you have hard feelings. And in order to move forward in a constructive manner, you have to be working with somebody who's going to be objective. Trust is essential here because there's already a breakdown of it. Otherwise, you'd probably still be married. So neutrality really comes down to, do you trust the other agent? And that means you focus on the house, you focus on making all parties happy, and you focus on doing a great job. Now, this is something that is especially essential for really working with any client, but even more so in divorce and probate situations, which we'll talk about on another video. So with neutrality, let me give you an example of what played out with this Mar Vista West Los Angeles house. We accepted an offer from a buyer. The buyer happened to be an Emmy Award-winning artist and classical musician. This Emmy Award-winning buyer got an escrow, had originally gone with a bank that I won't talk about, but I rarely do business. If you want to know, just comment below and I'll message you directly. But anyway, had gone through this one bank. The bank didn't want to give them the loan because, yeah, well, they're in the entertainment business, get income from many different sources, and that doesn't really sit in the cookie cutter box of some of these banks out here. So we were in escrow. The appraisal wasn't happening. The appraisal ended up happening. It came in low, way low, like $1.7 million. Keep in mind, we were in escrow for $1.780 million. So then what happened was they couldn't get the loan. Well, that's a really shitty situation to be in. Not only do we have a divorce situation, but we have a buyer who can't even get the loan. So we let them shift. Something happened though. There was a buyer who had come into my open house. They were a cash buyer. They'd kept their eye on it. They didn't offer. And they ended up asking me what we were in escrow at. I told them, they asked me to represent them, and I wrote an offer for $1,790,000. That's correct. That was $10,000 more than we were in escrow. And the kicker, it was a cash offer. Now, most agents in this situation would take advantage because I was scheduled to make twice as much money if my clients kicked out the original buyer and went with my buyer. But I consulted with both the husband and the wife, and separately they agreed they wanted to make it work with the current buyer. So what we ended up doing was asking them to pay $5,000 in the seller's closing costs. Now, I was earlier in the business and I didn't realize that lenders don't let you do that. So what ended up happening was $5,000 less on repairs. There were some foundation issues that they had asked the seller to repair, and instead of doing those, they forfeited that money. And although we probably could have pressed them for $10,000 because there were $10,000 of repairs that they had asked for, the sellers collectively and independently agreed that they didn't want to do that. So as you can see, you make sure you consult with both sides because you can't do something that pisses off one side and you can't do something that pisses off the other side, and you can't do something that pisses off both sides. But unlike a normal situation where you're probably talking to both couple at the same time, in a divorce situation, a lot of times you're talking to everybody separately. And as I mentioned, it is more work, but it's the client that matters most. And in this situation, it's the warring parties. And that brings me to the third point of the checklist, and that is the involvement factor. The involvement factor is really you're dealing with a divorce. So sometimes you're going to be dealing with the lawyers as well. Maybe it's gotten so bad that they won't even talk to each other. You might be dealing with multiple accountants. You might be dealing with a situation where you're actually consulting with the family members instead of the two people going through the divorce. And how you communicate with all these parties is essential to your success in the sale. Because the reality is, when both parties have already moved away, sometimes they don't even want to deal with it. It's just a pain in the divorce that they're going through. And as I mentioned earlier, you might end up needing to help one or both parties secure their next home. And that means stepping in to help them find their next home, writing the offers, and keeping their business separate. Now, one thing that you really should know, if you're going to be buying another home after the divorce, till the divorce is finalized, your partner will need to quitclaim. Now, quitclaim is basically where they release their claim to the property because California is a common property state. So if you're not on great terms with your spouse, then you may want to hold off until the divorce is finalized. And especially Involvement means being available for everybody, because it doesn't just come down to price. It doesn't come down to neutrality. It also comes down to availability. And involvement means making yourself available to everybody. They're going through an especially difficult time period in their life, and the last thing they need is a lack of communication. So being available means sometimes answering your phone on vacation when maybe you wouldn't. It means over communicating so that they have peace of mind. And it means giving everybody involved the same level of respect, just like you would want if you were selling your house. So if you're going through a divorce in the beach cities of Los Angeles or anywhere in LA County, go ahead and drop a message below if you want to talk a little bit more about what the best strategy is for your house in your situation. Because the reality, every divorce can be a little bit different and needs a little more attention or love. And this is just one way that we help you fulfill on getting rich on your living situation. Thank you for following us on this video. Subscribe and hit that notification button so you could be the first to see these videos even before we send them to our clients. It's Kevin DeSilva here. Have a wonderful day.